this?
And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Papiden.
I'm your co-host, James McVeigh.
And we are Fermenting Opinions, the podcast and hangout show in search of a more palatable political ferment. This is May 30th, 2019. This is going to be a hangout covering the recent public statement by Bob Mueller regarding his report that he's finally spoken out about that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about religious tolerance tonight, or lack thereof, maybe towards Christians and Christianity in the U.S. We have joining us tonight. We've got RJ, Haley, Drew, and Casey from Domestic Edition. Thank you all guys for joining us. How y'all doing tonight?
Great.
Doing good.
Very good. Fabulous. James, how are you, sir?
I'm wonderful.
That's good. That's good. So let's get right into it. Was it 2 days ago now?
No, it was yesterday.
It was just yesterday. There was supposed to be, it seemed like this thing with big fanfare. Bob Mueller is breaking his 2 years of silence during this whole investigation that he's done. And it was like an 11-minute presser.
Yeah, Bob Muellered it. I mean, like exactly what you should have expected. He essentially just talked about things that people were confused about a little bit, echoed the exact words out of his report, and then made it clear he did not intend to testify to anything that wasn't written on paper already.
Yep. I think I heard like the theme music to Get Smart playing in the background.
Yeah, basically that's what he did. Was he was like, hey, so as far as obstruction and Trump is concerned, we did not charge Trump with obstruction. We didn't reach a conclusion because it's not our place. That's Congress's decision on whether or not a crime was committed. Here's why. The DOJ policy in place that says you can't indict a sitting president, and the fairness policy in general that says it's not cool to accuse somebody of a crime when they don't have a chance to be in court to defend themselves. So Bob Mueller gave what he said already in the conclusion of Volume 2, where he basically just said, hey, we're not going to reach a conclusion here. If we could exonerate the man, we'd do it. We can't, but we're not going to accuse him of anything. And if you want to go forward with it, there's a process for that. It's called impeachment.
It seemed very much to me like he was essentially just defending the work him and his team did, and was sort of saying it in legalese without saying it. If we're going to do anything about what was discovered, it would be an impeachment.
I mean,
go ahead.
His entire 11 minutes or however long it was, he literally just read from his report essentially, and then clarified that if he testifies before Congress, he's going to read from his report. He made it clear the report is his testimony. He spent 2 years writing it. This is what I'm going to talk about. I will not discuss underlying materials. I don't feel like it's my place. It's Congress's job to deal with this.
Sure. Guys, what do you think? Anybody just jump right in. Come on.
Well, it seems like he doesn't want to be part of the dog and pony show for sure. He put his testimony down. He's not going to be called in and harangued. I mean, he's made it pretty clear if you do call me in and harangue me, it's going to be real boring. So that's the only way to get out. He has touched this incredibly sticky mass and somehow escaped from it just from saying, no, the only thing that I will ever say is written on this stupid paper. Now read it.
I think that's a temporary situation, however.
Drew, expound on that.
Well, I mean, I was talking with RJ prior to this, and RJ was making the comment that he felt that it was kind of naive to think that he wouldn't get called, or he wouldn't get called to testify, and that it would basically stay that whoever was questioning him wouldn't stay on target, and I tend to agree with that. I think there's a lot of damage that can be caused by simply muddying the waters.
Well, and I think that's what Mueller's trying to avoid.
Correct. That's entirely what he's trying to avoid. But I think it's still kind of naive to think that he can actually get away with that.
you
I think he's going to get dragged down.
Do you think
I think he can get away with it. Because all you have to do to get away with it is shut up and not say anything. That's the easiest thing in the world if you're a professional like him. Just sit there and stare him down and say, "Here's the report."
Sure, but I think that the real question is, Mueller is not going to defy a congressional subpoena. He's a career law enforcement official. He'll show. And if he shows, even if he wants to just stonewall and literally sit there and stare at Republican House members who are going to be completely off subject, like that's what I think he's actually fearing, that there's going to be a concerted effort to undermine the integrity of his report. The damage
that's already happening, yeah.
I mean, but the damage will still get done on the through the right-wing channels that are already distorting what the impact and content of the report are. Just today, Barr said, I disagree with Mueller. If he wanted to say that Trump committed obstruction, he could have. And as James already pointed out, Mueller walked through why he couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's factually not true.
Right. Right. And yet he said it.
Also, not only is it actually not true, it's also important to visit the fact that there is no DOJ policy or anything else that says that Barr should have offered the DOJ's opinion on whether or not there was enough evidence to support charges or anything like that. I mean, all the special counsel statute allows is for Bob Mueller to give his report to the attorney general. There's no requirement that it be made public. There's nothing involved there. He is absolutely barred from making an impeachment referral explicitly, like say Ken Starr did in the 90s, because there were after Nixon, we expanded the powers of the special counsel pretty broadly. And then both political parties in the 80s and early 90s got a taste of what that looks like. We went through Iran-Contra with Reagan and that special investigation, and then we went through the Whitewater Clinton, sex scandal investigation with Starr, and no one liked the results. So both parties let that statute expire, and we went back to the original special counsel statute, which is extremely limited, and it does not afford the special counsel to make recommendations about a sitting president as far as charges go.
Oh, that's a fabulous bit of history. I hate to drag us back in the conversation. And once again, I will get used to this format and everybody's names and the talking heads, but I'm having trouble. But somebody was talking about the damage done, muddying the waters, that type of thing.
That was me.
Honestly, at this point, how far outside of that 30% that would follow Trump to the grave, how far outside of that 30% is really getting convinced by these desperate ploys? Yeah, I see these posts by Lindsey Graham where that man has gone insane. He is off his rocker. And he's just, but even Mueller, he couldn't come out and say that it happened. Oh. Like, how much is this Kabuki Act really affecting the discussion outside of that hardened 30%? I'm asking honestly because I do not know.
Trey, I was going to say, actually, I read something about Trey Gowdy today, a person I really respect. I like Trey Gowdy. Yeah, he went really hard on that Benghazi stuff, and it was a little much. And he's obviously conservative, but he was a hell of a U.S. attorney, and he is obviously a great trial attorney as well. When he asked questions, when he was on committees, he was very, very good at it. Gowdy said today that he doesn't believe there's evidence of obstruction, and that. Oh, go ahead.
Maybe he was always a shill.
My takeaway from it was, Mueller wrote a 400+ page document and watched for a while, he realized that the majority of people, including people in Congress and in power, couldn't fathom and digest this 400 page document of legalese. So he did an 11-minute soundbite that was like, hey, here's what I was doing. Here we go. And, by the way, this is what the effing thing says.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm not. And you know what? He is basically saying, you know, for anyone who, like, Democrats or anyone who is on that road, you know, this wasn't my power, and, you know, maybe you shouldn't have put all so much, you know, it's all your eggs in the Mueller basket of thinking that I was going to come out and just be like, yeah, you know, because guess what? You're going to have to do this on your own. But by the way, this is what this 400-page document says. And I didn't have the power to do anything further. And here's a reminder. So,
Yeah,
you know, I don't know where that falls in that 30% thing. I don't really think that 30% is the target. I think, you know, what he's, you know, saying is he's recommitting to the fact, like, I have made what it's known in my report, and this is what it says. You're not going to get me to go outside of it, you know, because you're going to have to do this on your own. I already laid it out. And by the way, this is what it says.
yeah.
So.
I think that what's interesting about what Haley's saying is how little attention has been paid to Appendix B, which was the answers, and I'm going to air quote it here, answers of the President of the United States to what was essentially a written deposition under the federal rules. And the commentary at the beginning of Appendix B that states explicitly that no follow-up was done because he is not a reliable witness.
Oh
Yeah.
That ought to be a meme.
Oh no, I mean, but that's repeated throughout the analysis in volume 2 as well, is that essentially, you know, this is a balancing test on the testimony from other people. Where we're at here is that no one's story contradicts itself except for Trump's. They're like, you know,
they didn't use that. They said they had substantial evidence, but
no, they did. But no, they go further into that. Especially when they talk about Don McGahn, Chris Christie. I think Sam Clovis was involved. There was another KT McFarland was in there. There were a lot of people who bolstered the same claims of him trying to fire Mueller. This is one example where they're like, you know, in the aggregate, we have no reason to doubt the testimony of any of these people. There's only one person that seems to be lying to us. It's the president.
It's not even worth following up on his answers. That's what Appendix B says. And I find it mind-boggling. And I can understand why Mueller didn't want to get into it. But it kind of exposes the fact that the Mueller report came out, and there were a bunch of talking heads trying to spin it. And from there until yesterday, when Mueller talked about what his report said, the media just kind of juggled it. And in the past day, we've seen all of these like, well, this is just a bombshell. Look, he said that he didn't even have the option of charging the president. It's like, right.
Yeah, he said that. Yep.
Because it's a 400-page report.
That's news to people. They don't know.
Hang on, sorry.
But no, it's
I'm sorry.
400-page long report. He had to break it down into an 11-minute soundbite. Because
I love when you said, Haley, that he made it into a soundbite. I absolutely love that, because nobody's going to read it, and people need to be able to just have that audio play on loop, you know, like in the shortest means possible.
I mean, we don't have the attention span that we used to in previous generations.
You know, because what did most people
nobody ever had an attention span. Nobody.
Most people, not most people, a lot of people took from the 400, almost 50-page report, no collusion. Oh, no collusion.
That's
total
true.
Exoneration. No collusion. That's the level of understanding we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, legalese pisses people off. I mean, for a moment of empathy here, I like to put on my MAGA hat every now and then and try and empathize with the Trump voter. How infuriating is it that the guy who is apparently in charge of determining this isn't even allowed to say it? We get it. We sitting here in this, I guess the five of us understand that. And a lot of other people who talk about it every day understand it. But for the everyman Joe, and the news tells you, this guy's going to tell us, this guy's going to tell us. And then the news says he's not allowed to tell us. That's going to make you insane.
Yeah. There's
there's a lot of pushback, at least anecdotally from what I've seen. Again, I engage a lot in other political groups aside from ours. There's been a lot of pushback from Trump supporters echoing the same kind of thing of how can you charge obstruction if there was no underlying crime? The other thing that pops up that because this is setting in with them, and now they're worried about what Mueller said because they heard it and they haven't read the report. Is the other thing that they keep bringing up is, well, what about the FBI abuses with the dossier, the Carter Page FISA applications, and all of this? And that's an interesting avenue that I'll let you guys can all talk about that.
I don't need to, because it's just deflection. Like that's
it's whataboutism, as Theron Parham at DE likes to put it. It's just BS.
Well, it is, but I mean, it becomes clear that when you combine those two things, because a lot of these people talk about those two elements at the same time, that they don't understand what they're talking about. They obviously haven't read the report. And what I found really interesting is that Mueller did one of the best jobs I've ever seen. Somebody writing a lengthy legal memo and making it easy to digest. I'll brag on Drew, one of our guests, for a minute. Drew has a knack for really summarizing legal facts and appellate motions and things like this, like really giving you a narrative and an analysis breakdown that's not boring to read at all. It doesn't feel bogged down. It doesn't feel like you're like really being just kind of legalese out. Mueller is the same way.
It's mostly because I'm not smart enough to make the legal arguments.
Now,
I just try and speak like I'm
no one buys your self-effacing bullshit here. You know what you're talking about.
Fine.
Just own it.
Okay,
just own
but yeah, just take the compliment, bro.
Fine.
but seriously, the Mueller report's like that. It's really not hard.
Well, what was very surprising to me was that there wasn't some sort of almost summary of the argument sort of thing that you like when you do an appeal or something. You typically do a summary of the argument, and then you go into all the rest of the legalese, and they just did 400 pages of gobbledygook, and that's going to glaze over everybody's eyes like within a heartbeat. And I think that's exactly what happened with everybody trying to read it.
I don't think that.
I mean, that's what you do with like any kind of motion. You always put a summary in the beginning,
right?
Like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want. This is.
It was surprising. It was very surprising to me that they didn't do that, and I think that Mueller's comment was in fact very much a summary of the argument. It just, why the hell did he not put it in there?
Because he didn't want to show his hand. I'm sorry to talk over anybody, but everybody suspects his intention, so he's not going to say his intention at the beginning. You have to read it to figure out his intentions.
Hang on, there are executive summaries throughout that. Throughout the report, and they're 4 or 5 pages long.
That's honestly the only thing.
But they're really not hard to follow, and they're pretty concise.
You're expecting people to go through to find them too, though. I'm just saying something.
I mean,
straight
I don't even expect judges to do that.
There's a table of contents.
Right, but we know that Mueller was pissed at Barr for not releasing the executive summaries, which were designed for public release. Like that was the letter. That was the letter that came out right as the Mueller report was hitting, when it was finally released. That said, like, why the fuck aren't you just releasing my executive summaries instead of your not altogether factual and accurate summary that was 3 pages long?
After spending 36 hours, reading it.
That's an excellent point.
But Mueller specifically spoke against that in this speech that we're discussing right now. He specifically said, I don't think that it was disingenuous. I don't think he was out of good faith, or it was a violation of good faith for him to do what he did.
Right. He did. But he also wrote him a letter that said, why didn't you just release the executive summaries that I put out there?
Yeah, no, I get that. What I'm saying is that he still reconciled that and said, I don't think that it was wrong for him to do it this way.
I think he was steel manning Barr to not look partisan in that situation. That's honestly my
a little bit, but he addressed it. I think
he did.
But
he
had an argument.
This was the purpose of those executive summaries. They were for public consumption.
Yes, no, I know that. I mean, obviously, we all know that. That's exactly what Mueller said in his letter to Barr, was that, hey, I prepared these things. There was no grand jury material in this. Like, these things don't need to be edited. They don't need to be redacted. Why wouldn't you do this? And Barr's version was like, no, I want to give him the whole report at once. Which, yeah, I think that if you look at it from that perspective of Americans have the attention span of goldfish.
Well, it's not just that though. It's anytime you vomit. I mean, you're familiar with the Gish Gallop, right? You're familiar with copy pasta, right?
Mhm.
When you are having an argument with someone, you're trying to present a case, and you vomit a giant load of information at somebody, the odds of them actually engaging with that material is almost like zero, right? In almost every case, because it's used a toxic power play. So I think in this case, what Barr did was, if you want to rebut what I'm saying, here's the giant wad that you have to deal with, but I'm telling you what it says. Go ahead and disagree with me. You get to filter through 400 fucking pages.
But I mean, he didn't clarify.
If you want to refute what I'm saying.
For anybody who's actually read the report and understands it, he didn't clarify anything.
No, he didn't.
He literally just summarized what he already said.
In terms of most people who look at what Barr said and look at, the data dump of the report itself, like, they're not going to engage much further than that. And I think that was by design. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah. No, I guess it's fair.
I got a question.
Sure.
If you we had an argument about this over in DE recently, and is the Attorney General the president's lawyer? Obviously, officially, no.
Officially, no, not even.
Not on paper.
Not even.
Exactly, not on paper. But I'm thinking about actual precedent and practice here.
No, I mean, no. Across the board shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be. Yes, I'm talking about precedent, though.
I can think of instances where Ashcroft acted as W's lawyer. I can think of instances across the board where Holder and Loretta Lynch acted as Obama's lawyer. And obviously, and now we finally have William Barr, who's acting as Trump's lawyer. I feel like
it happens every time.
I think it's really funny, though, that I really don't like Jeff Sessions, and I think he was a terrible pick for AG, and I don't like his regressive policies. But he was pretty much the only person who in my lifetime, I can point to and say, hey, during your whole tenure as AG, you really didn't do anything off the board. You were actually pretty fair and impartial about the things you were doing.
I mean, kind of. Didn't he oversee sort of?
Well, he did make
minimum sentences.
He made that. Well, I don't
want to go off on the
not during his time as AG though. And not only the only thing he did during his time as AG that was questionable was like the push to get rid of DACA, which I understand that position and I can agree with it. I'm not really into executive orders and
executive orders are garbage.
But his middle name is still Beauregard, and so you can't take him seriously.
Oh no, I don't.
Thank you.
I mean,
would you like some cookies?
I mean, I don't take him seriously, period. But I do have some respect for the man. I mean, as soon as his integrity was called into question with this Russia investigation, he recused himself. He stayed the hell out of it.
He's smart and cagey. Good for him.
I wouldn't call him smart and cagey. The man has standards. That's what he has.
Loretta Lynch is meeting with Bill Clinton on a tarmac right before a decision's made. About
they saw each other for like 12 fucking seconds. It wasn't something.
That's more than enough time, and it's not okay. Like that. Loretta Lynch knows damn well that's not okay.
Not okay.
Yeah, no, everybody knows that's not okay. That is bad. You should not do that. But not just that. Eric Holder and his stonewalling in defense of Obama's gun policies or his gun trafficking policies with Fast and Furious. Like, there are multiple examples of AGs going to bat for the president that appointed them.
And I agree with that. However, I don't think there are so many examples of AGs acting as if they were literally the president's private lawyer. And Barr is just, there may have been people who crossed the line from time to time, but Barr lives on the other side of the line here.
And he has since his last stint as AG.
Yeah.
I mean,
seriously.
But he did have, a very good counter. He could, the president can post a meme in the Rose Garden, no collusion, no obstruction, and Barr can say his own rendition of the report. And, you could say, well, if you actually read the report, and then Mueller came out and gave a high-level summary. Finally,
I think we actually.
I mean, I still don't actually think that he conveyed, like it. He didn't explain to me what's into the report as if I was in fourth grade or anything. But this was as succinct of a summary I think we'll get from a person like Mueller.
Yes, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. What I was going to say was, Barr's little 4-page letter he put out when the report was first released, where he exonerated Trump, essentially. I don't see a falsehood or a lie in any of that. And we've actually talked about this in prior Hangouts.
It's technicalities.
Yes, but I mean, that's being a good attorney.
It's how lawyers lie. It's what pisses off the common man.
But lawyers aren't lying. That's the thing, is there's not a lie told here. It's what you're doing is spinning the truth.
It's a conversation about the definition of is. Like,
My mom always knew when I was lying, even if I didn't specifically say something untrue. That's all I got to say on that.
Sure, but I'm just making the point that
I get you. No, I get you.
I think
there's
Barr
being
is,
less than forthright without technically lying.
I think Barr is
understand
very
that.
masterful for the role he's playing.
Oh, he's good at it, sure.
I don't think
Like
you're going to find
McConnell
somebody
level
better.
Yeah.
McConnell's not good at it. McConnell contradicts himself all the time, and it's funny.
But he doesn't fucking care, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well,
McConnell doesn't give a fuck.
yeah. When he's the whole, hey, if you had a lame duck presidency in 2020, would you fill a Supreme Court seat? And he was like, hell yeah, we would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he understands how to get shit
I
done.
mean, he's
saying.
literally the alt-right meme god, essentially, where he's just like, get good, cucks.
Yeah.
Oh, it ain't all right to stand your ground and try to fill a seat. There's nothing all right about that. Democrats ought to do it when they get a chance.
Oh, they
Yeah,
will.
but
They will. No,
Yes.
now we've
Yeah.
eroded our integrity to that
We
point.
lost
Yes.
Haley, we lost Haley.
Oh, they would have been pussies if they didn't do it.
Let's bring this. Oh, she's back. Okay.
Okay.
Let's bring this back to. There was a thought I had earlier in this thing about Mueller saying that he did not want to testify. You
Mhm.
said obviously he gets a congressional subpoena. He's going to show up, but what's he really afraid of? And this is something I think I can genuinely sympathize with. When you see the level of punditry that goes on, and when people are questioning, you think about in the last 2 years, all the people have been brought before congressional hearings, and the Kavanaugh thing, and the
Mhm.
everyone gets their few minutes to question, 4 or 5 minutes, whatever it is. And most people will sit there and give a short stump speech, right? And maybe ask a question, but they're
Sure.
mostly bloviating,
Well,
right?
yeah, usually they come with a prepared statement.
Right. And that's, I think, honestly, is a waste of time in terms of like getting to some deeper truth, right? Because it's not what the point is
But
about,
it does
right?
give people a
It
basis to ask questions.
Yes, ideally that's what it's for. That very seldom does that seem to be happening lately, is my point. I can imagine his fear is that he spent these 2 years doing this investigation. He's got the report. It's out there. He said, basically, Congress, grow a fucking spine and impeach the guy. If you're going to do anything, I wash my hands. I want to be done. My work is good. My work is valid. My people are good. My people did good work. Don't fuck with us on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he gets his ass dragged before Congress and has to testify publicly, what do you think all of these people who are going to use this opportunity, this stump speech, and pontificate, what they're gonna do? What all the pundits do, right? They're gonna torture him. They're gonna torture his work. They're gonna try and undermine it. They're gonna gaslight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the game they're gonna play.
But
this is the game Mueller does not want to play.
Before we get into answering this question, I want to ask the whole squad here. Has anyone watched any of Mueller's previous congressional testimony, like when he was serving as FBI director for like the past 10 years, anything like that?
I never.
No, I read his he did like an investigation for, I think it was Nike.
Yeah, as an
Or
independent,
Adidas.
he's like kind of like an independent investigator, like Lou, whoever did for the Saints bounty scandal type thing, like a former FBI director hired by a private organization and put together a report.
Sounds like a great movie.
Anyway, why I ask about this is, I know what you're saying, Dave, and I agree with you. Like, probably he doesn't want to. I mean, I know that he doesn't want to be involved in that. Obviously, I don't think he's afraid of it in the least bit. You're not going to get Mueller to go off track. And I know we talked about this a little bit briefly when RJ and Drew were talking about it earlier. You can try and throw this mudslinging shit at Mueller, and I don't think that it's going to make much headway based on the stuff I've seen from him before too, and the way he handled this. He's going to stick to the report.
It's not that he can't weather it. I don't think it's that
he's just going to say that
Yeah.
he's going to repeat on
I
DOJ policy. I'm not going to to expound on something I've already written. I prepared a 448-page opening statement. You've had it.
I mean, I think that he, he released his report and has watched for the past 6 weeks or so or whatever of people failing to grasp what's in it. I don't think he's afraid of being questioned. I think he's, he wants to, there's a reason why he went on and gave the high level summary. He, what he wants to do is to try to mitigate the risk of further misunderstandings, further, inability to actually to hear the message he is trying to convey and everything. So, it's like, no, he's not afraid of being questioned by anyone, but he doesn't want, to engage, he wants to try to, mitigate the potential for him to engage in a, circus where his actual report and point continue to be missed.
Haley, if I can try to summarize that really quickly and ask you if that's accurate. I think what you're saying here is that he was concerned, or at least he was concerned that that the report was being misunderstood and being skewed and everything, and he wanted to just kind of summarize the main points that everyone's talking about, like, hey, why didn't you give us an answer on if obstruction was a crime that was committed by Trump? Why didn't you indict him? If there was a crime, why aren't you saying that? That kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, sorry, yeah. We were addressing a whole bunch of different things at once, and I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page with you.
I felt like for the portion of Mueller's speech where he was talking about his reticence to come out and testify because he's already made his testimony and it's on paper, he came off as a little bit of a fuddy-duddy. I believe that the justice system should work this way, and so I will will it into being. And I don't know that it works that way anymore, Bob.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to clarify that too.
Sure.
Do you think that well, first of all, have you ever met anybody who's on that level that Bob Mueller's on, that really has that reputation of just being impartial and doing their job?
Oh yeah, I think that I don't think there's any question that he's trying to be impartial. I just think that he thinks things work in a way that they don't.
And my next question is do you think that he was in the fuddy-duddy realm of trying not to break the mold, or do you think that he didn't feel it was appropriate to break the mold?
I think those are the same thing.
So what?
I agree with
I
that.
guess, are you calling him spineless? Because I kind of got this idea that you're calling him spineless.
No, not spineless. Just
He's
unaware of the way that the world works today. I think that he is trying to impose his idea of the separation of politic and fact. I did my job, people. I did what I was supposed to do. I gave you the report. It's accurate. You can read it for yourself, and it should be divided from politics. And that's just not realistic. I guess it's not that it's been played out in the month and a half it's been available.
Okay, I'm sorry. Again, my issue here is it sounds like you're criticizing him to some degree, and I'm wondering.
Yeah.
If you
criticism isn't bad though.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
I mean,
wrong.
but even if it's unrealistic, do you want him to break the mold? Should he have said, actually, you know what, screw it, we should have indicted this dude and broken DOJ policy and said, screw it, let's challenge it?
No. I just think that sitting there and saying, I don't have any further testimony to give, the testimony is the written word, is something that someone who's 74 years old and has spent a lifetime in law enforcement, where law enforcement was always very highly respected, which is, even though law enforcement is still among the higher respected public offices, has come down a lot since Watergate, where everyone crashed.
Sorry.
And I also think the fact that he has been in law enforcement for so long, but he also he's been a private consultant for the better half of his recent years. And, whenever you read something like Nike, and, whenever a corporation is saying, like, okay, like, what exactly is wrong, with how we're doing something? How bad are we? What they want, like, that is them asking for these, this sort of, they're being they're trying to be reflective, be proactive, be self-aware and everything. They don't want you to sugarcoat anything, and it's your own ass on the line, your own stockholders. You need to make sure that you're doing what you do to make a successful company.
Mhm.
And that is that's how I sort of took in his report. Was it wasn't it wasn't trying to persuade to a certain degree. It was to try to lay out every single thing that
Yeah.
and so I mean, that's what I do with clients. I'm not trying to because they're not a judge, they're not a jury, they're
Mhm.
not anything like that. What I'm telling my client is completely unsugar-coated. Hey, this.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
This is an analysis of the facts and the law applied.
And I think that you can, that is a fine and dandy way to go about analyzing a situation, and no one, I don't know what the right way to act in that sort of capacity is now, because again, I don't want you to sugarcoat things, and I don't want you to try to persuade. But I also think that you also have to realize that your audience it's not the same audience. It's a different I'm struggling to actually piece together accurate words to describe what I'm thinking.
I think I know where you're going, though. Essentially, is that you're bound by different rule sets and different expectations, right?
Well, yeah, I hope somebody doesn't mind my jumping in.
Go ahead.
Mueller is a guy who understands kind of the terrible power that he and his organization yields. Just the other day, and not to dwell on this issue, but to offer it as example, it was released the transcripts of the Martin Luther King tapes, and I don't even want to get into the subject matter, because we don't know if it's erroneous or anything like that. But these tapes, the transcripts of the tapes released, and it's a reminder of this of a chapter in the FBI's history that and something that's just essential to the FBI's nature itself. These guys are the secret police.
Yeah.
Every country has one,
Mhm.
and the difference between a good secret police and a bad secret police, well, they're all bad, is the thing. But the less bad ones are the ones that understand what they are and what they can do to a society if they go beyond their bounds. And Mueller is a man that understands this. And he knows that if he goes beyond the diagnostic, he will be contributing to this kind of spiraling. People like to use the word constitutional crisis, but like America, to add on to what RJ was saying, it really doesn't work like this anymore. Things have gone off the rails. Americans have forgotten what the rules are. The news is the rules. When the report comes out, the news to people is what the rules are to begin with, and then like what he says is secondary because people are baffled by the rules. So
I think
Yeah.
that it's. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do you want to go?
No, you go.
Well, it's just yes, and like I said, I don't know how exactly someone in the position of a special counselor actually goes about conveying what he learned and everything. But I do think that you see a stark contrast with how Mueller is conveying what he investigated versus how Barr is conveying his points and everything.
Mhm.
You see Barr is totally sort of keyed in to that political spin. He's the one who is saying no collusion,
But
when
but
collusion
Barr-
isn't even collusion not a crime.
But, well,
Like, that's just
but
what
hang
Trump
on,
is saying.
on that end, Barr has the leeway to do that. And give me just a second, because Casey, I love what you're asking there. If you could just take that for 1 second and hold on to it, because I think that's really important to talk about another huge talking point of potential abuses by the FBI on the early investigation with Crossfire Hurricane. If you could hold on to that for 1 second. RJ, I really wanted to ask you, and I can now hone more into it, is you talked about you feel that Mueller's like part of the script, I guess, is an older generation, long-term law enforcement establishment type of guy, and he's playing it by the book like that. Do you feel that it would have been appropriate for him to buck those trends in any kind of way?
I think that what I'm criticizing is the portion of the speech where he said, "This is my testimony, and the testimony is the written word, and that's it." Because he's going to submit to a congressional subpoena.
Sure.
So if they want to ask him questions, they're going to. And for him to sit there and pretend like it's, 1954.
I mean, he can. Well, what I'm saying is he can answer those questions based on what he's already written in the report.
Yeah. Wait, guys, imagine for a moment. I'm really sorry to interrupt.
That's not entirely true, though, because you can ask him to elucidate on things that came out in the report. For example, are you aware of the elements of obstruction of justice?
And he can say that in these 4 or 5 circumstances or whatever, we found substantial evidence of each element.
Right, and
which he said in the report.
Right. But what they could do is
he can read the report to them. It's going to be brilliant. He's just going to sit there and read it to them, and that's the way that they'll finally read it.
Okay, but anyway, RJ, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, RJ.
No, what I'm saying is they can ask him for each of the 10 or 11 examples of potential obstruction, how did each of these meet those elements?
Mm-hmm.
And if they met the elements, could someone be charged for obstruction for meeting the elements of obstruction?
And they can ask that question, and then he can turn around and say the exact same thing he said before, is that that's not appropriate for me to answer because we're talking about a sitting president.
No, but that's not what they're asking. That's not answering the question.
It is, though.
Because no, it's not. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Not answering the question. They're asking the question of if a person were to do the things described, would those meet the elements of obstruction? Could they be charged?
Well, if they weren't the president, but he's the president.
That's the answer that you'd be looking for if you were the person asking the question. I agree.
He could say that, but he already said that on national television, and he already said it in his report.
It wouldn't be anything new.
None of it's new.
Yeah, no. Okay, RJ. So
none of this is new at this.
Hang on, RJ. I think I understand what you're getting at. Is that you feel that he still played the proper card of sugarcoating it too much when he could have broken it down and said those exact words that, hey, if anyone else had been, in this situation other than the sitting president, we would have indicted them.
No, that would have made it sound like he was working for the Democrats, though. He cannot come
Well,
off
it's not just that. He's violating DOJ fairness doctrine. And I think that's where it's going to come back to, whereas he's going to turn around and say, I can't violate doctrine that restricts me.
Here's my take, if I may, for a second, that he's made sort of a maximum effort to stay in his lane, right? With this thing. Here's what I can do. Here's how much I can lay out. I can only say so much. I can only take this so far. Mm-hmm. I'm expecting people to be able to interpolate and draw, rational conclusions from what I did here.
During the few minutes
and act on it politically, because that's what's supposed to happen.
During the few minutes that he actually talked about that's exactly what he said, is that we could not charge the president with obstruction because of these two intertwined policies.
And I don't think it's necessarily his fault that he didn't say more.
But that's also
the same thing harder, right? Because I think
because he's bound by fairness policy.
If I can say
the thing is that, but that's not the question. That's not the question, though. So sure, he has said. He's given his report, and in his press conference, he has said, "I could not charge. Per these guidelines, per these rules, I could not charge." That's not the question that he's asked.
The question is, would anyone else been charged? Would anyone else, aside from a sitting president in this position, have been charged?
Not aside from a sitting president, because that's an exception. You know,
Yeah.
that like, and so that is viewing these acts through that lens. It's saying, take a step back. If you knew X, Y, and Z, if you knew a person did X, Y, and Z, does this meet obstruction of justice?
Well, Mueller
Yes.
doesn't want to answer that because to Mueller, that's a stupid fucking question. I'm sorry to curse, but like,
That's okay.
to Mueller, you're sitting there, and this asshole is asking you that question, and you're just like, you're trying to ask me whether you know the answer. You're a freaking lawyer.
Here's the thing: the majority of Americans aren't lawyers, and people. I appreciate whenever things are explained to me in clear black and white.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, but that's
and
not
so,
Mueller's job.
like,
That's
Hang on,
really not Mueller's job.
I'm gonna join
I'm
Haley
sorry,
on
I
this
talked
one.
over Haley.
Oh, hang on, that's okay. I was gonna say I'm gonna join Haley on this one because correct me if I'm wrong, Haley. I think what you're saying is that's a trial attorney question. That's something that you're trying to give to a lay jury so that it comes out to them in black and white that, oh, hey, the light bulb just clicked.
Right. I mean, so that's like you give 150 or whatever page report, and you see like people aren't getting it. You do a press conference. You really don't want to go, in front. You don't want to have to do a hearing. I wouldn't want to have to do that either. He's 72 or whatever, 74. I would want to retire. Who wants to do that kind of crap? And yes, he has not said, hey, this is what he said these are the elements of obstruction.
Mm-hmm.
He's never said, and if someone does X, Y, and Z, they've committed obstruction. He's always said, and I can't indict, we can't indict a sitting president.
True.
I cannot violate these orders by attaching it to the president. Everything has been viewed through that lens of this exception that was his investigation. He has not actually been asked questions about, hey, you're a lawyer, you've done jury trials, what does this mean actually? So those are completely, and that is outside of his report. That's asking about his own experience. That's asking him to break it down like I'm a fourth grader kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's.
My question there is that, do you think he could still invoke the DOJ policies to shield that answer? Could he say,
why would he if I am not asking anything about the president? I'm asking if someone does X, Y, and Z, have they committed obstruction of justice?
yes? And so what he would say, at least if I'm Mueller in that position, my response would be, you're giving me the fact pattern of something that involves the president of the United States, and it sounds like you're asking me to accuse the president of the United States of a crime.
And respectfully, my question's a little bit more specific than that. I'm not. I'm asking if someone does X, Y, and Z.
This sounds like the actual hearing, guys.
Legal, professional opinion.
We're pretty much there.
Committed obstruction of justice.
Like, this is how the argument would go actually at the hearing, though.
I think so
Like,
too.
the congressman would get mad and be like, answer my question. And then he'd be like, I did. It would go back and forth, and that would be the hearing.
Yeah, but he wouldn't. I don't think that he would invoke the DOJ policy there. I think that he would just answer the question.
Really?
Well, that's what we don't know.
Yeah.
It's my, if again, what I was saying earlier, if I was going to say on Mueller here for a minute, that he imagines that he's done this work, that it should be obvious to anybody with reading comprehension skills that, and I'm sorry to go that way, but essentially
That's okay.
It's pretty plain, I think, that 100 years from now, 200 years from now, kids are sitting in their 7th grade social studies class or their history class, and they're looking at what happened there and say, why the fuck will we need to ask those kinds of clarifying questions? It was completely fucking obvious what happened.
I mean, it's all, keep in mind that impeachment.
That's what I think Mueller's thinking.
Impeachment is a political process.
And his words can only be tortured from here on
Impeachment's still a political process.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it or not, it's not a fair trial. It's not the idea of our criminal justice system. It is a political process by nature.
Which that brings us. God, it is the most rude thing I could do to segue on somebody else's show. But I mean, Mosh came out and said that we could impeach. Isn't that a hoot?
Well, I mean,
there ain't no criminal requirement. All he has to do is violate the public trust, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. High crimes and misdemeanors, which really funny because Trump went. I'm gonna tangent here Trump went full Scalia on this one, saying it had to be high crimes. He said he tweeted it out or said it something like that earlier that it had to be high crimes and misdemeanors. Well, he had to do both to be impeached.
Well, no, I mean, but in all
He
fairness,
fucking
that's
said
that's
that,
a
for
that's a
real.
great defense because that's how Bill Clinton won in the Senate.
Oh, buddy.
Well, it is. No, but it is. That's
It's a
what
thing
they.
people can
That
say.
Emmett Flood hung him up on that one. That was what it was.
Christ.
Tell me where getting a blowjob and lying about it is a high crime or a misdemeanor.
No, it has to be both. That's what he said.
I mean, this is also the what is
That's like
argument,
it's like Scalia and cruel and unusual punishment. That's
Yeah.
cruel
The
and
what
unusual.
is argument was
Yeah,
deposition testimony that
Mhm.
people just slaughtered.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
bad.
no, I mean it was really
bad.
bad. Yeah.
It wasn't an argument.
Yeah.
So it's not calling a good defense. But
Nobody,
anyway,
nobody knows what high crimes and misdemeanors are anyway. For the most part, it's accepted that the House can impeach for whatever reason it finds fit.
yeah.
That's true. And also keep in mind we've had 3 impeachments and all of them have involved obstruction of justice.
Yeah, which
Easiest
actually
to
brings
nail
us back
down.
to it brings us back to an interesting discussion that's been going on the page, which is should you be able to be charged for obstruction without an underlying crime? And obviously the statute says yes.
Uh-huh.
And
So does the case law.
that in the case everything that we have says yes, but I would argue that public policy says yes because you create a perverse incentive to obstruct justice to the maximum that you can if you are guilty of a crime. Because if you can't be found guilty of the crime, you can never be found guilty of the obstruction.
That's
which is
Yeah,
smart
but-
shit.
That makes
Sorry.
total
Am I
sense.
not
good-
lawyer self say that?
Who was trying to weigh in? I'm sorry. I was going to say I actually made this argument with a close friend of mine. Some of y'all are familiar with, who I'm not going to name drop, but they were saying, how can you basically what you just pitched, and I said, well, you're a former police officer. You know that you can charge people with resisting arrest, even if the underlying arrest never actually, came
Or
to
tend to a
fruition.
real crime.
And this person turned around and said, well, as a former police officer, I've never seen a conviction of that. And I was like, well, as a former prosecutor, I've secured 2 convictions of resisting arrest where the underlying crime never happened. Like, that's the nature of the statute. Your recompense in that situation is not to fight back and do illegal things. Your recompense is to get your day in court and win.
Right. No, completely agree.
I mean, that's how obstruction works.
Damages.
Zero pushback here. Yeah.
That's the very nature of the obstruction charge. You do not need either a charge or an underlying conviction to support obstruction. You can obstruct an investigation into something that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible. They're separate crimes.
Right.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm just saying that it's not something that is, I would say maybe it's generally accepted, but there are a lot of people who think that you need to be convicted of an underlying crime in order to be found guilty of obstruction.
I understand the general concept of that idea. It's the pushback you get when you explain it to people and they still want to push back. I'm like, well, no, that's not real. And I'm just kind of, well, no,
Right.
yes, it is. Like,
Yeah.
you can't interfere with an investigation and try to derail it, even though you know you're innocent.
Yeah,
think
I offered a hypo that got no likes and no traction, but I'm offered.
It did involve
whatever.
economics.
No. But it was let's say you've been charged with a crime and you're on trial for it, theft, DWI, whatever crime you want to commit, and you didn't do it. You're on trial for it, and you know that the state is going to call a witness that's going to testify against you or whatever. And let's say you see them walking to their car whenever they're driving to the courthouse, and you take their car keys and throw them, and you try to prevent them from, getting into their car. You tackle them whenever they get to the courthouse. You do whatever you can to stop
Just
them.
push them into traffic.
Flatten their tires or
Yeah, and sure, I don't want to get into assault or something, but I'm just saying you do what you can to try to prevent that person from going to court. That is a different act that you're doing with a different mindset. That's a different crime. And even if that person still gets to court, still testifies against you, and you aren't found guilty of that underlying crime, you've still done that thing of obstructing justice.
Yeah.
You've still tried to prevent a witness to testify against you.
Haley, I love that explainer. Thank you.
Yeah, no
That's
one else
great.
did. Great.
No, I did. No, I
If
did
I had
actually.
seen it, I'd have liked it.
Haley, I actually really love that, especially the idea of throwing their keys because
Guess what?
I
No one
don't-
liked it on the page.
Oh,
I'm
I
sorry.
didn't see it.
In all fairness,
In my
you know,
arms.
I'm normally at work during the day. I didn't see that, but
You
the
don't
example
actually
that you
work at your
gave
job.
okay. Anyway, the actual example you
doing?
gave that was specific about throwing the keys, that to me is not a crime in any kind of way. It's not really
Well,
theft. It's not theft.
trespassed on my chattel, man.
Yeah, but that's not a crime. That's a tort.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, yeah.
Still.
But yeah, you know, if you take
That's
your keys and throw them
technically
somewhere,
That's technically a theft or battery.
no,
Yeah, no. It all.
It's
all
depends
an
on-
item that's
Hey,
intimately
guys.
connected with your person.
you need to intend to deprive them of that item indefinitely, which
It doesn't matter. We're not talking about that. That's
Anyway,
why I didn't want to actually get into.
anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not about the
underlying act.
method.
Yeah, all I'm
Yeah.
saying is you're not permanently depriving anybody of anything. You just took a set of keys and threw them.
So-
You had
Yeah.
you had
Whatever
one
you're
intention.
doing.
Yeah, you had one intention. It was to
hit
obstruct
the broad
justice.
strokes. RJ, you bring up a good point because I hear that argument often. I think we're all in sort of consensus here. It's totally possible to obstruct justice, right? Whether or not you committed an underlying crime.
Mhm.
Oh,
We
yeah,
do
I
see
mean,
that a lot.
you
We've
give
seen it
it-
on the page. We've seen it, you know.
But I do think it's important
Elsewhere.
that we ran through it really quickly to explain it like they're
Right,
five.
right,
You
right.
know, like the idea of give it in layman's terms so people understand, because I understand the general layperson's idea of
Right.
how the hell can you be guilty of obstructing something when you did nothing wrong in the first place.
Right.
You know, I mean, I get that general reaction.
And you just need to have it explained to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, I think
Explain
that-
to you like you're in 4th grade because you're
In
not
fourth-
going to
in
read
fourth
that
grade.
400+ page document.
All right. But,
Mhm.
you know, we've been at this for a while. If anyone wants to wrap up this whole Mueller end, anyone got any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I
comments?
just wanted to throw one thing out there.
Mhm.
I think that the Democrats' way forward here is to open an impeachment inquiry and never vote on it. I think that their best strategy from here is to take the investigatory power of impeachment and probably not expressly, but just be like, yeah, we're opening an impeachment inquiry and just never vote on it.
Does anyone know?
Because-
Does anyone know?
That's so garbage.
Hang on, is that actually required under House
I
rules?
don't think anybody knows.
I mean, I know the Constitution doesn't require
I mean,
it,
the
but
House, yeah.
Well,
But-
I know that you vote to move to impeach, and then the rule says, and then there shall be a trial on it.
yes,
I know-
exactly.
and I
Yeah.
believe-
That's Article 2. Like, I'm asking, not outside of the Constitution, where like the House actually establishes their own rules they have to operate under.
I
You
don't
know,
believe there is.
when you hear things about like,
Yeah, no, and I mean that's what I was getting at. Is I know that it says the House has to move to impeach, and so what do you mean by open up impeachment? You know, investigation. I think they have to move to impeach.
well,
They actually have
No,
to do
no,
that.
I think that's the formal vote on impeachment.
yeah,
However, there is an impeachment inquiry which can precede that vote.
there's
Okay.
there's actually I can't remember if it's the Judiciary Committee or committee alone, or if it's an actual full House vote, but I do remember that both for Clinton and Nixon, there was a vote to open an impeachment investigation, essentially.
Yeah.
Not to vote on impeachment, but to say, hey, we're officially investigating this for impeachment.
But I mean, all the things that we've recently discussed in like the previous impeachment stuff, and in other things, like, but those were investigations opened, and I don't think any of them were official impeachment hearings until the House moved to impeach.
No, they were. And that's the thing. And that's why I'm asking it.
I'm
They
not
did it-
sure though
they did
about
it-
that.
I know they did, because I mean, I actually just read about this today, but I believe the House under Clinton moved to open impeachment hearings in like September or something of '99, and they officially impeached him.
That was after the election, or that was no, they moved to impeach after the election, and they had been talking about it for a long time. That's why Newton had to
I'm
resign.
sorry, there was two different pieces. There was there was them opening the impeachment hearings, and then there was them voting to impeach, and they were several months apart. What I'm asking is, does anyone know if there is a House rule, like say you know how we had, until we went nuclear for appointing justices in the Senate, there was a rule that you had to have 60 votes to do it, but you could change the rules if you had a simple majority. So they changed the rules so that only a simple majority could confirm an appointed judge.
I don't think there's a nuclear option for.
Okay, so
I'm asking.
I'm gonna step in here.
Are they required to open an impeachment
They're
hearing?
not required to, but before the entire House vote, which is what Haley was talking about, the Judiciary Committee can hold hearings to investigate whether it should, whether the House should open a vote on impeachment. And that's what the impeachment inquiry is.
The Judiciary Committee is required. I know under House rules, the Judiciary Committee is required to draft and accept articles of impeachment, which they then put to a full House vote on impeachment itself. So the Judiciary Committee has the lead role.
Yes, but the House Judiciary Committee has the lead investigatory role, and that's what's important here.
That's what I'm asking: is do they have to officially declare they're opening an impeachment investigation?
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
they do.
Sure,
they do.
So right now they're just pissing in the wind.
Right now they're trying to avoid the I word. That's what they're trying to do. They think
don't fucking say that. That's so. I hate that the I word.
No, that's what they're doing.
They're right. That's true.
I'm putting it on the Democrats. They're trying to say, like, oh my God, we don't want to talk about the I word. I think it's in their interest.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
At this rate, though, if we don't move over to our next topic, we're just gonna we're gonna beat this thing.
I think honestly, yes, Democrats in the House. I think they're in the process of. I know Pelosi is sort of kind of mealy-mouthed about it, and
Pelosi's especially mealy-mouthed about it. Pelosi doesn't want it to happen.
Well, because she doesn't have the consensus.
Well, it also distracts from the actual Democrats' agenda of trying to pass legislation that matters to voters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you really want to waste all this time?
Also fair, but at the same time,
everybody knows that the Senate is not. You're not going to get 67 votes in the Senate to remove Donald Trump.
It's never about removal. It's never going to be about.
I get that, but
we'll never get the votes. It doesn't matter if he sodomizes a headless child on Fifth Avenue.
My Lord, what porn do you watch?
Okay. Oh, you don't even know, man.
Okay, but my point is that the Senate, as soon as the Senate gets an impeachment referral, they can fast track the shit out of it and acquit him and say, "Hey, you guys are full of shit. It's over with." And then it's done. Then it's done.
Which is why you do the inquiry. Which is why you go with RJ's plan. You just do forever inquiry.
The idea is
never vote.
July of 2020, you drag his ass through this thing.
I mean, honestly, as I'm thinking out loud on this, open up, they don't have to vote on it.
No, they don't. No,
I would like your taxes, Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
This is an impeachment inquiry.
All that stuff to drag.
They're already getting his taxes. They already have grounds for that.
Oh, I agree, but I'm just saying they could do it. They could troll it all they wanted to, because they're never going to vote on it, because that's the plan.
I'm pretty sure there are.
So anyway, my final point on it is, if we've got kids sitting in history class 200 years from now, and they look back and they think we didn't impeach this asshole, like if you impeach somebody, it's for what he has done, right? So if we didn't, it's because we didn't have a spine, essentially.
But I mean, I don't know. I think the ultimate goal is, the goal is to get him out of office. If you know that impeachment, actually moving for impeachment, is not going to be the avenue that is likely to be the most successful, what else can you do? You can split his time. You can drag on.
And that's my point.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're not trying to remove him with impeachment, because we all know that impeachment. We've all, I'm sure, been involved in arguments with people about how, yes, Clinton was impeached. Yeah. He just wasn't removed from office. Those are two separate things.
Absolutely.
Removing Trump from office is going to happen through a popular vote or through the term limit, right? Like, it's going to be one of those two things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be through impeachment, but impeachment might be a vehicle to help you move toward him not getting a second term.
Yeah. That's the idea. It really is to tie up it, and you, all of you probably at some point or other have heard me float this, that it's about tying up his resources essentially and embarrassing him publicly with, who he is, which was what he was trying to obstruct in the first place. Whether or not who he is was in itself a crime. He's kind of a corrupt, scuzzy piece of shit, right? And didn't want that to be quite as on the nose. That's where the obstruction comes from. It ties with Russia and so on and so forth. Like, that's what he was obstructing. Okay, fine. Like, let that out there. Let him not be where he can conveniently tweet about it, but where he's sitting, in front of Congress and being grilled by people like Kamala Harris and AOC and all these people that he on Twitter can't stand and is very derisive of, and watch them, just fucking bend him over a little bit. I think if that can be done effectively, and that's a gamble, to be honest. If that can be done effectively, that's what's going to hurt his 2020 odds more than anything, I think.
Well, he's fucked for 2020. A gerbil with enough money spent in the Rust Belt could beat Trump on 2020.
I don't know, because I have so little faith in humanity at this point. But but I think that's the best strategy. Basically, is to torture him and tie up his time and resources. It's not because anyone's trying to really get him removed from office via the impeachment process, because really just there's not enough faith in the process, to do what it's really supposed to do, which is take him just like him. But anyway, that said, I think that's sort of my final word on it. I want to move on to the other sort of big topic, which was really we were supposed to like hit on this a little bit and then get on to like the major topic that I was going to yield the floor to Casey about.
Oh my!
Yeah, man, this is gonna be all you, dude. But we had conversations, just on Facebook, what have you, about the idea. I have sort of a pejorative and divisive view of, or derisive view, excuse me, of evangelical Christians, of people who wear their faith on their sleeve and feel offended and put upon all the time by secular people, secularism, secularists, pushing back about Christian ideology, Christian experience in the public sphere, whether or not they're being discriminated against, whether or not they're being persecuted, whether or not they're put upon, whether they're being treated unfairly. I have sort of a negative view of people who complain about that, but I wanted to be open to challenge. I want to kind of understand the perspective from the other side of how it might look when someone like me is always on the attack, right? In case it was one of the things that you and I had sort of talked about privately, and also again on the page and stuff, about whether or not maybe people like me are coming at this the wrong way. So wanted to yield the floor to you.
Oh, well, thanks, David. That was really insightful, I suppose, introduction. Well, first off, the topic header, I suppose, is religious persecution of Christians, in quotes. The way that they or we or whatever want to talk about it, often on signs with really embarrassing parchment font, is religious freedom. That's the hashtag. Mm-hmm. I like to go back. In fact, I'll just do a brief review. I've got a bit of a timeline here. In 1993, Clinton signed the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
No, that's cute. That thing should never have been allowed to exist, but okay.
Okay, well, that's your opinion. But anyhow,
they enacted legislation. Hang on, they enacted legislation that literally usurped a Supreme Court opinion. That was his entire point.
Well, that's what laws do. If you don't like a court's opinion, then the people come together and pass a law.
Yeah, but you can't pass a law whose entire point is to upend Smith v. unemployment. Like you can't turn around and say, hey, we're just overturning this one opinion because it got.
Well, I really wish I'd read into Smith v. Unemployment before this. I seem to miss that.
That's okay.
But could you inform us on that?
That is that's a case out of hell. I think it might have been Utah. It was someplace where Native Americans who lived in the area were defending their right to use peyote spiritually or religiously.
Scalia, right? Spiritual applicability, right?
Yes, and it was a ruling that they actually got rid of strict scrutiny for First Amendment tests on that end. They moved it down to intermediate scrutiny, and it was this huge kerfuffle. And essentially, what the RFRA says is that we're restoring strict scrutiny as the standard for the religious tests. That's basically what the law does. It says that, no, we're going back to strict scrutiny.
Okay, could you explain the levels of scrutiny, please? Because
okay, oh good Lord, and I'm going to need a little help here from other.
Because my familiarity with the RFRA is more at the state level. You see, there was a ruling, and I'd like to get back to what you're talking about, but there's a ruling, Barron v. Flores, 1997, which said that the federal RFRA didn't apply to state RFRAs, and that is what brought about the wave of state-level RFRAs. There are currently 20 of them passed and 16 proposed. 6 of those past states have explicit protections for LGBT individials. Anyhow, that's my info dump. But if you could expound on the level of scrutiny, I'm getting a little bit blindsided, and it's not your fault.
Casey, what I was going to ask you is, do you know if that was a SCOTUS decision?
Oh, no, that was just a federal court.
Just a federal court for whatever.
Yeah, it never went up the chain, as far as I understand.
Was it a district court or an appellate court? Do you know?
Boy, well, if I had Wikipedia, like I usually do for most debates in text form, I'd go and verify that.
No, I understand, and I apologize.
Oh no, it's thank you for asking a very good question.
The issue with the federal RFRA is that basically its entire purpose was to overturn one decision that made it easier to legislate against religious freedom, essentially.
Well, and that seems very odd to me because my acquaintance with the RFRA, especially with how it's been enforced in Indiana, has been to enable that. The first use of it was to allow a Muslim man to keep his beard in prison in Indiana. So I'm wondering how this law, so you're saying it was used to apply strict scrutiny to at the federal level to Indians, so they could no longer use peyote. But as far as this has been used at the state level, which I know Indians are subject to federal law, they would advocate that the religious freedom was impeded.
This is a confusing thing. Sorry, there was a decision. I think it was in 1979, and I could be wrong about that date too. But that was called Smith v. Unemployment, and essentially what it did was it changed the scrutiny standard from strict scrutiny to intermediate scrutiny. It dropped the scrutiny level for religious freedom tests, basically saying that these Native Americans could not use peyote and they had no overarching right to push this idea to where the whole thing was a challenge over whether or not they could collect unemployment while still using drugs.
My point is that decision would have gone differently if they were Christians.
Yeah,
right?
maybe, but
wait, are you guys pissed that they made a law that protected Indians' traditional values?
No, wait, stop, hang on. Here's the deal, is that it changed the scrutiny standard. It dropped it down. Strict scrutiny is very rarely applied. The last time it was applied and the government actually won was Korematsu. And if you're familiar with Korematsu, it was Japanese internment camps. Right. That's about the only time that I can think of that a statute challenged under strict scrutiny survived. So they dropped the level down. Congress responded. Hell, I don't remember when it was. I think it was the 90s when the RFRA was passed. But the text of the thing literally said we're changing the scrutiny level applicable in court, which is overriding the Supreme Court, which makes the thing entirely null and void. It's a violation of checks and balances and the separation of powers.
Well, I would just I really would like to go through and review, which, now is not the time for it. I would like to go through and review how the federal FRFA has been enforced overall, because apparently and I'm sorry, I've fumbled this as you've explained it to me, I think 3 times now already. But the one example that I'm being offered of federal enforcement of this law is the precise opposite of how it's been used at the state level.
Yeah, no,
as I understand it.
Sorry, what I was giving you again with that case. That case happened before they passed it. They passed it after the case had already been decided to try to override what was decided in that case.
Okay, so I am so sorry. Oh my God. Okay, so Congress made it so the Indians could take the payment.
Did they?
Yes, essentially, but no, it was. They didn't do it based on that case. They didn't say that. They said, and I'm looking
Man,
it up
I
right
feel like
now.
we're way off
It's
in the
okay.
weeds
Yeah,
here.
go ahead. It was passed in 1993. Ensures that interests in religious freedom are protected. That's its entire point. Although the actual language is, it was introduced by Chuck Schumer. That's funny.
I'm just so puzzled here that I really don't understand why you think a court ruling that's not based on like essential constitutional business, or maybe it is, maybe I'm misunderstanding. Congress didn't like the ruling, so they changed the law so that the rulings would change, and that's literally how the system works, and it gave people more freedom, and you seem upset about that.
No, what I'm upset about is that the SCOTUS immediately declared it unconstitutional a few years later in Bourne v. Flores.
The SCOTUS did that.
Yes, they did. They declared the RFRA unconstitutional. Obviously, you cannot usurp SCOTUS's power to be the final arbiter of constitutional decisions.
Well, no, I thought
okay, wait a minute.
I thought that the law that they ruled in Barron v. Flores was that it didn't apply to state law. You're saying it got thrown out entirely? Because I am very sorry to have misrepresented that.
What's happening here is that we're conflating two different things. Okay. Yes, the courts can say, here is what your laws as written actually say. That's what the role of the courts is. And then the legislature can say, okay, we'll clarify that for you. But they can't do that in a way that still violates some fundamental right that is guaranteed by a constitution, state or Supreme Court, or federal for the United States Supreme Court. And I don't think there's any give there. I think that we're all saying the same thing.
Okay. Well, anyhow, I'm sorry if Barron v. Flores actually did completely throw the whole thing out. That's not what I read earlier, and I'm very sorry to have misrepresented that. Either way, it made it so the states had an incentive to pass this themselves.
It did. No,
and that's what happened 20 times over with another 16 proposals on top.
And I was going to say, you're absolutely correct about that. Essentially, what I'm saying is the federal RFRA was shot down in that case in Flores, where they said that it's not a proper exercise of Congress's enforcement powers to the states. So,
but it still applies to direct federal cases, though.
No, it really shouldn't. But for some reason, we continue to apply it, and
it really shouldn't. Wait, I don't know why shouldn't it? It's the law.
Because it's unconstitutional.
Because
I'm sorry, I thought that you were going back and we're like wasting a ton of time on this, and I'm very sorry because it's exclusively my confusion. But I thought that you had just said that they had only said that it didn't apply to state law, which if that case would not, it still apply to federal law.
There is no federal common law.
Yeah. Also.
Well, wait. No, what about Indians?
No, they continue to apply it to federal law. I mean, they do. The federal government still gets hit with the RFRA, which is weird. And also, the court has changed shape since then, so they allow it. The most recent one was Burwell v. Hobby Lobby. And
that is the one in which, in 2014, where wholly owned private organizations can seek an exemption from the birth control requirements in the ACA. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Well, I remember when that exploded on the internet. And everybody had a bit of a big freak out. At the time, now I would love to be corrected on this because I love to be corrected. But at the time, if I'm not mistaken, they came together and made a bit of a compromise on that, where essentially all you have to do is get another piece of paper signed with the insurance company. There are ways around that ruling, but anyhow, that was the problem with the birth control through the employer paid for health plans, it's not a problem with birth control. It's a problem with employers having to provide people's health plans, which is a ridiculous system. I don't know how you resolve that because we decided to double down with it with the Obamacare or whatnot.
Well, anyway, hang on. Let me stop here because I feel like I'm you brought up the RFRA and we got on a huge.
No, I was trying to do a review of the religious freedom movement. I'm sorry, I apparently moved to a different topic.
Okay, guys.
No, it's my fault.
Here was my thought and my understanding of the topic at hand is when I see like, oh, Christian Baker says it's really not fair to me that I can't discriminate and not bake the cake for the gay couple, like I'm being put upon. My mind goes to fuck that guy, sue him into oblivion. But there is a common perception also from the other side that that's really just dickish and unfair to sincerely held religious beliefs.
Well, it's about the level of involvement. I'm very sorry I've been talking a lot, but I'm as I understand it, I was brought here to talk about this.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
It's all about the level of involvement in the ceremony. If you make a cake and there's nothing gay about the cake, and it's just a good that a guy walks in the room and says, "I'll give you $50 for that cake," or $100 because it's a wedding cake, or $500, or $1,000, dear God. Then he takes the cake and he walks out of the store. But let's say that you're a photographer. Have you ever been to a wedding and seen what the photographer does at the wedding? They are intricately involved in the ceremony. So if you're a photographer and you are being asked to intimately participate in a ceremony that you don't recognize religiously, that would be really horrible for the people getting married. So they should go find someone else because that would be horrible for them.
Well, if it's religiously offensive to you, especially, I mean, you're literally capturing video and still photography of an act you find offensive.
Well, and you don't have to find it offensive. If that's another thing. Like people like to paint the religious as easily offended. Like a lot of religious reaction, especially in this day and age, is not discussed or anything. It's just like a legalese thing where they're just like, well, we're not allowed to do that.
Well, if it doesn't rise to the level of disgust or something that you find offensive, I'm having a hard time understanding why. I
don't have the legal argument about this. I want to understand that perspective. That's what this is about.
Oh well, and I mean, the perspective. Oh, okay. If you want to understand the perspective is complex because the perspective has nothing to do with the law. It has to do with spin. It has to do with people projecting their emotions and troubles and what it comes down to is you had some bakers who lost their business over this stuff. Yeah. And I can't remember. There's been kind of decent. There were like 2 or 3 different sets of bakers when the story was really going on, and it was all about the bakers.
The most important one is Masterpiece Cake.
Sure.
The one that actually ended up being in court. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. Once again, if you're asking me about perspective instead of the legalese, I went and took notes on the legalese, but I didn't take good enough notes. So I'll tell you about the perspective. If you're a Christian reading the news, and you see that all this guy did was say that he didn't want to bake a cake for a wedding, and his business was literally destroyed by it. I mean, it doesn't seem symmetrical. I'll say that much.
Okay, I'm jumping in.
Sure.
If you don't want to do something and not doing that thing is really unpopular and it costs you your business, that's
these guys didn't know that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That was the new thing.
Hang on a second. I want to pitch to RJ on something specifically because I know RJ will answer this question probably better than I can. What was the actual scope of the holding in Masterpiece Cake?
Masterpiece Cakes. The scope of the holding in Masterpiece Cake. Oh, go ahead, Drew. You want to go? Go.
Well, no, they ultimately punted on the issue.
Yes, but there was still a scope of the holding that basically said
the scope of
the holding is don't be a dumbass if you're going to be talking to.
The scope of the holding.
You're basically don't show your contempt towards the people that you're going to be bringing cases against.
The scope of the holding was that Colorado had a state law.
Mm-hmm. That was
And
state law for LGBTQ.
Exactly. And the state law also had a provision for religious freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court said in the agency's decision, which is really what this all grew out of. It was an agency.
Yep.
The agency never took into account the religious beliefs of Masterpiece Cakes.
Mm-hmm.
That they expressly said that it didn't matter. And under state law, under Colorado state law, that was required for them to consider. And because they didn't consider it, the initial agency decision was invalid. They had to punt it all the way back to the agency in order to make a determination based on all of the factors, including the religious beliefs of the owners of Masterpiece Cakes, to determine that. And at that point, the case was settled. So
right, and part of the problem was that, at least from the transcripts that I saw, it seemed like they were just openly hostile towards the cake shop.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, they never gave him a fair shake on the religious argument at all.
So, if they may have been right. In fact, I think they were right, but you still have to at least give, pay lip service there.
Yeah,
at least
you still have to follow the right friggin' procedures. The law still applies even if you think somebody's an asshole.
Exactly. That's really what it came down to, is that the Colorado law allowed for religious exemptions here, but when the state board, who was in charge of enforcing this law, basically just ignored that and said, yeah, we're not interested. You're a bunch of bigots. They never even gave them a chance to present their own argument for religious discrimination.
And that's what I want to guard myself against that's essentially really the purpose of this topic, is because I could see myself in the position of, you could have a religious cult of, wanting to base stab small children. I don't give a fuck you want to do that. That's your religious belief. It's a shit.
I give a fuck about that.
Right now, but I'm saying it's that belligerence towards whatever that belief is. It's obviously not that hyperbolic and ridiculous. But
well, I'm sorry, David, but I honestly do take offense at the comparison of Abrahamic religions to a child face stabbing cult. It's really not the same.
Look,
wait a minute, hang on, wait, I got a real question about this.
Hold up.
Are you sure?
I'm trying to acknowledge that. That's what I'm saying.
Speaking of Abrahamic religions,
if I'm taking that hard line, I'm kind of making.
Yeah, if you're about to bring up the story where somebody didn't sacrifice their own kid, then that's its own ending.
But just let Dave finish.
Yep, sure.
But that's all I'm saying, is that the fact that I can make comparisons like that and saying, oh, well, you're doing awful thing X. I can imagine awful thing Y. I don't give that any more respect, right? So, screw respect for, X that you're holding to. What's lost in there, the baby lost with the bathwater, is that, X might be a sincere and genuine thing, and dismissing it that easily is basically hurting dialogue, is hurting our ability
freedom
to come
let me
consensus, right?
I was going to say,
that's really what I'm trying to get
can
to.
I ask
I'm
a
more
question
on the side of this than maybe I've sounded initially.
Can I ask a question to kind of summarize this a little bit better? I think the idea of the topic here is, are we either legally or culturally or whatever moving more towards secularism, where we actually oppress religious freedom, specifically as it goes to Christians?
Freedom of religion is also freedom from religion.
Okay, but and I'll take comments on that. But that's my idea of the topic, at least, right? That's where we're trying to be within the realm of. Is
sure.
I think it's very unfortunate that thus far the only instance of religious freedom discussion that we have gotten to is a case of someone either possibly spitefully rejecting to give someone a cake. It's a lot bigger than that. There are several other issues at hand, and several other dynamics. And secularization is a huge part of it. And but once again, I'm not the host of the show, and there are like two people who haven't even freaking talked. So
and I was going to say, as far as that goes, I can totally sympathize with and get on board with Masterpiece Cakes as far as that Supreme Court decision went. They never even got the option to utilize their freedom of religion argument that was enshrined to them in law.
There were some other cake baker guys at the time in the news that were total assholes, though. I got them mixed up. I couldn't tell them apart because all the coverage just bled together. There were some asshole cake guys. There were some nice cake guys. There was a pizza guy in Indiana who was a prick. I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag.
But my point here is that I understand is that if you want to use that as one example to argue that religious freedoms, particularly for Christians, in the face of a more secularist society, their rights are being oppressed. Yeah, I see that. The state government didn't even take it into account and just said, yeah, fuck your religion. You know, like, nope, you're bigots. You know, you don't even get a chance to make the argument.
I think that's a strong word, oppression. I think that's a very strong word.
But yeah, those were all very strong words. But they were
Hey guys, can we let RJ get a word in, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I think that James, you just made a great point. I was looking up some stats earlier. A 2016 Gallup poll put religion in the United States at approximately 73.7% Christian.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly Protestant, somewhat Catholic, and a tiny little smidgen of Mormonism.
I would actually I'm sorry, I'll let you finish your point. I'm very sorry.
I'm just counting Mormons as Christians because they believe in Christ.
No, yeah, it's all Christianity.
It counts. They count.
Yep. It's under the same umbrella. And I find it fascinating that people who are part of a religion that makes up almost 3/4 of American society feel that they are being oppressed. Same year, there was a Brookings and Public Religion Research Institute study said that approximately 50% of the American populace say that discrimination against Christians is as big a problem as discrimination against other minority or other groups in general, because obviously they're not a minority.
Mm-hmm.
That includes 75% of Republicans and 80% of white evangelicals.
Okay.
I cannot reconcile that in my mind.
But, you know, and I feel the same way you do on that one, RJ. I mean, I completely get where you're coming from, but I want to punt right back to you on this. In the face of that masterpiece Cakeworks decision and the factual basis for it, do you see how they actually get this feeling, though? I mean, the state government just
I would like to take a moment to build on RJ's point about the percentages. To be brief, I'm sorry, I'll try to keep it brief. I'm very sorry to interrupt, but let's go to a state like Oklahoma. And once again, I've already brought some apparently bad info tonight, so boy, don't trust a word out of my mouth, but Oklahoma City, right? And but Oklahoma State is by statistical error 100% Christian by one means or another. It obviously isn't really, because there's obviously one guy there at least who's not, but the statistics add up to that. And then if you go to Oklahoma City, it's 97% Christian if you add up all the types as RJ listed them. And I'm bringing up a whole other topic here, but it's part of this umbrella. In Oklahoma City, in 2009, they passed legislation to put up a Ten Commandments monument. In 2012, it was erected, and then 3 years later, it was removed.
Yes.
Now that's not the oppression. That's not what I'm bitching about. The protest against it came in the form of we should put up a Baphomet statue.
Mm-hmm.
Satanic temple.
Yeah, and ain't that cute?
Some of us in this conversation are way familiar.
These people, they don't. And once again, I've been brought here to talk about perspective, so that's what I'm going to talk about. And perspective is what's the word? Insane. It doesn't make sense, but it's. I'm sorry, I am off on a whole other topic here. But the point is,
talking about
you go into that population and you just tell them that we're going to put a Baphomet statue up, I'd say that's comparable to America going over to a 100% Muslim population and saying, we're going to start putting up crosses. Like, isn't that just shitty?
Well, for one, I'm a member of the Church of Satan.
Hang on.
Are you really?
The problem with that is any establishment, right? Like,
no, I get that it's wrong. The judges tossed it out, and the reason they tossed it out is because it was a specific interpretation of the Ten Commandments, which there is no consensus on. Some say there's 11, some say there's 12, some say the commandments are different. The judge did not throw it out because it was a violation just because it was the Ten Commandments. He threw it out because there's no confirmation of what the Ten Commandments even actually were.
Okay,
that was the reasoning in the case.
Isn't the problem an establishment, right? An establishment of religion, just any establishment. And if you're going to allow any establishment, whether it be the Ten Commandments, whether
I'm not here to talk about the legalese. I agree with you on the legalese.
I'm not talking about the legalese. What I'm saying is, if the government, this is not based on the Second Amendment or the First Amendment.
I was going to say, what is Second Amendment?
Second Amendment. This is not.
We can make it about the Second Amendment. That get real interesting.
Not based on the First Amendment.
I want to see how it's relevant to the Third Amendment.
Anyway, hey guys.
No. I love the Third Amendment. You cannot quarter.
The Third Amendment is actually very relevant in today. Internationally.
Wait. Let's not derail what RJ.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Isn't the question any establishment of religion? It doesn't matter how many people believe in it, which your example was 100%. And I'll grant you 100% in a certain area of Oklahoma. I'll grant you 100% in the entire landmass of the United States, just for the purposes of argument. But if you're going to have government money be spent on something that has a religious bent, you have two options. One is not to allow it. Two is everybody who wants to have a religious bent gets a stab.
Open market.
Well, once again, I have no problem whatsoever with how the case worked out. It worked out how our laws are supposed to work out. I'm talking about an attitude here where a huge swath of the American public, a sizable and highly influential on the media swath of the American public, like their only means of criticism against Christianity is overt mockery and just they think of these people as scum. They make it apparent in their conduct and how they talk to us.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, this goes back. I'm sorry, this really does go back to the comparison with the child stabbing cult. I'm sorry, it really does. Every single instance, where people are talking and they talk about the religious like we're a bunch of dullards, like we're violent, like we're a bunch of like they will take any non sequitur out of the Bible and just use an example to say that religious people are terrible. And that is the life that we live in right now. And it's because we're going through a complex transition as a nation where a majority group is becoming not the majority group. And it's going to be unpleasant. There's going to be oversteps and transgressions in either direction. And it's just unpleasant. And that's all I'm here to talk about.
Wait, can I clarify something? Because I want to make it kind of an example and bring things together, and of course I'm actually, where I was going to go with this is that what if your religious figure that you're demanding presents for isn't offensive? I mean, usually the Christians always find it offensive if anything else competes with their Christian ideals. But like, say if I wanted to erect a giant statue on my own dime, mind you.
Spaghetti monster.
Yeah. So say I want to erect a giant spaghetti monster statue on the courthouse lawn that I paid for, because you put up a nativity scene, for example.
Let's look at fucking scale there. Okay, no, let's look at scale. All right. You've got a rural community. You've got a rural community that wants to put a plastic baby Jesus on their courtyard.
One moment. Let's say the scale is 1-to-1. I don't want to like overpower. It's not a 40-foot statue versus like a 3-foot by 3.
You want to put up a plastic baby spaghetti monster next to the plastic baby Jesus?
No, not quite. I want my but sure. Yes. Okay.
It's like
cool.
a lost in semantics.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah, I mean that would be equivalent scale, right?
I want them to be equivalent in scale. Essentially, is that my spaghetti monster nativity scene or whatever is the exact same size and is far away from, but still on the courthouse lawn as the Christian nativity scene.
Okay. No, we're talking about nativity specifically.
Yes, exactly.
And once again,
and
I cannot win. I am not going to win a single argument with you fellas about separation of church and state, because that's not what I'm arguing. I'm talking about why people think this, why people think it. That's all. People's thoughts are insane. They don't make perfect sense.
People think what?
Casey, well, here's what I was asking and why I said this is because inherently, I understand the outrage that comes with Baphomet. You basically have a depiction of the devil, who is the evil person.
That's not offensive
about. That's not what's offensive about Baphomet. It really isn't. What's offensive about Baphomet is that he's a joke religion. Satanism is a joke religion. The guy who founded it and wrote the Bible for it says it's libertarianism with trappings. It is a troll religion that people use for political advocacy. It is not a real religion. That is the most offensive thing about it. That's why it's exactly the same as the spaghetti monster.
Wait. Then let me find something that I could use potentially. Let's use Islam. I can't use a depiction of Muhammad, mind you, or Allah. But
yeah, that would be really shitty.
But however, yeah, obviously. But I mean, give me a depiction. Give me a depiction of Mecca, like the 5 pillars or whatever, or something like this that draws these images to mind. And you have the crescent moon and the star and all of this, and it's the same exact size as your nativity scene, same scale.
Well, that's not the solution that people propose, though.
But I'm saying
the solution let's talk about what actually happens real quick before we talk about this hypothetical. Can we talk about what actually happens?
Casey,
because what actually happens is you've got a rural community that's been putting out the same plastic baby Jesus every year for like forever.
I want to hear this.
It costs no tax dollars because it was paid for fucking ever ago, and the groundskeeper guy does it on his time that he does everything else on.
You didn't let me finish my hypothetical.
Let him finish.
No, I'm sorry. I want to get back to the hypothetical. I just want to summarize what actually happened.
Finish, Casey.
And you've got this community where it's been this innocuous thing, and it's just been going on forever. And then one day, one guy gets pissed about it, and then it's gone. And that's your experience: is that your community isn't allowed to have this nice thing that everyone enjoyed and was just cute. You're not allowed to have that. That pretty much everyone on the community was just like, oh yeah, it's baby Jesus, isn't that cute? Like in your life experience, you're not allowed to have that because one asshole got mad, and all it was plastic baby Jesus out for 2 weeks around Christmas.
Sure.
Like that's your experience as a Christian. You're not allowed to have that as a community. You're not allowed.
May I finish my hypothetical?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm done. I'm going to be done talking for a while. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. What I was trying to get at was like, let's say that no one's paying for either one of them. It's just using public ground for it, like using public space.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the plastic spaghetti monster, people don't get that joke and are so unaware of it that you could put it up and people would drive by it and not know what the hell it is, and it would just not be a problem.
What if I made some acceptable Muslim monument? Again, I can't do it for Muhammad. I can't do it for Allah, something like that. But saying that I made something, generally reflective of that.
I don't know. I don't live in that county where you're putting it up.
No, I'm just asking.
I mean, but your whole point is that like there was this nice thing that you say nearly everyone in the community appreciated, but do you also recognize that there's a chance that maybe not everyone in the community appreciated it being public?
How much did it hurt that guy to walk by baby Jesus? I'm just talking about practically. We can get into the Constitution, and I know what the constitutional answer is. And if you put constitutional scrutiny on every single thing, it's going to work out certain ways.
I'm not asking about constitutional scrutiny or anything, but let's say you're a Jew or whatever, and you live in this community, you have your own community, but you're a clear minority and everything, and on public grounds they always build up this Christian scene, and it does make you feel a little excluded, right? And
I guess I would tell you that Christians wouldn't have any problem putting up a Passover scene. Christians love that stuff.
Well,
I'm being snarky and specific to your example. I'm sorry, I was being snarky.
Good.
But do you recognize though?
No, I get that. I
like,
really do. No, this is why it's an interesting problem. This is why it's fascinating. This is why it plagues us. It's just like I don't know what to answer to that. Like, if it offends him that badly that plastic baby Jesus is on the lawn for 2 weeks, then I'm sorry, and he can sue about it, and that's his right. And he's going to win every time.
It's not that it's offensive.
Guys,
It's not that it's offensive. It's that, this is a general public land for general public displays, and his community feels excluded, right?
Yeah, I would call that taking offense, feeling excluded.
Sure.
I'm sorry to parse words.
Sure, like that's a natural progression, but also, if you're you're a Jew but from an established community in this town and everything, but there's supposed to be this secularism, and consistently year after year, don't you feel as if like maybe that shouldn't, like, you understand that there is this secularism in this country, but it hasn't been practiced for these years, and at a certain point you're like, you know what, like, why are y'all only representing, sure, it's the minority, but this is supposed to not be this way,
Yeah.
and so, like, I understand from what I'm gathering is that, seeing the satanic temple, hearing the hypothetical about the spaghetti monster, that seems dismissive of the Christian faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's mockery. Yes, it is mockery.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's dismissive of some people's community faith beliefs. But do you also understand that, as you said, this has been a practice that has been going on for years, and people can, eventually just be pushed to the point to where they want to make that pendulum swing.
Yeah. Oh, and this is something that Christians need explained to them a lot, and that they really don't get. There's nothing about this topic that says that Christians don't have a lot to learn, and in fact that's the basis of the topic, is that they don't understand what's happening.
I think that's the basis of Christianity too, right?
Yeah. It's
so.
Yeah. We're going through what we're going through right now is just it's a very sensitive transition, where you used to have a majority population that would dole out recognition and access to people, and like that sounds really shitty today when we describe that, because that is like the definition of a terrible society according to how things. But at the time, that's the only society they had. And they had this overwhelming majority society, and it doled out recognition and access to people, and now that society has been parsed back to where it still has a lot of say, but they can't be magnanimous and grant people things anymore. They have no power to help any minority by saying, "Oh yeah, you're one of the good ones." They can't do that anymore. They've lost a lot of ability to have positive influence on society, and they don't understand their new place, their new orientation, and to them all of these slights add up. And I will say, though, that a legitimate gripe is rolling secularization, which is something that Haley brought up, where in religious freedoms types, they like to use the word public space. They like to use the word public space. Why? Or public square. Religion, still needs to be allowed in the public square. And you've got in today's America, you've got federal money, state money. You need it to do anything almost anymore. Like you try to get a subsidy, you try to get a tax benefit, you try to sign up for a grant, you try to do this, that, or the other from the government. And if you're religious, if you're outwardly religious, you have no access to that, and that becomes bigger and absorbs more of your society around you all the time, and you're just not allowed to be a part of that anymore. And I think
I'm totally missing you on that.
really,
So wait, here. Let me just see if I could piece this together. The Christian culture in America and in the situation in this community, has for years experienced a level of influence,
privilege. Let's just use the word parlance of our times. Privilege.
You said the phrase they have been able to positively influence the community by spreading
as much
their
as
words.
they could. Yeah,
and they have enjoyed this level of influence.
Yeah,
and now there is a reaction to that level of influence. At the end of the day, Christians are, in this particular community for this, and I will say in general, that you have your faith and you truly believe that you want to make a positive impact on this world, right?
Hopefully.
And you've always done these things because you feel as if it's a positive influence.
Yeah.
But there
what
is,
if it's not?
Well, it's not what if it's not, what if other people just see it as influence?
Yeah. Well, it's very important.
So like, is there actually oppression of Christianity when there's just a reaction to their level of influence on the community?
Well, and I've said several times that's a strong word. I wouldn't use that word. David, it was a very provocative title for our get together, and I'm fine with that. But I would not use that word. I'm sure that a lot of Christians that you bump into on the internet would. So I mean, I can't speak for them. And although didn't you bring me on here just to speak for them? But
essentially, yes. I don't even know if you're a Christian yourself.
Right, but like these people, they experience slights. That's what it is. It's this slights add up. For a while in the news they called them micro infractions or something like that.
Microaggressions. Yep.
There we go. Yes, that was in the news for a long time, and I didn't like the clinical terminology. They're just slights. That's what they are.
Sure.
And these slights add up, and that's what social justice is all about. Is you take an accounting of these things, where and so far with minority groups, it's been intensely necessary that we do this accounting because it was happening and no one was talking about it. And we needed to add up, like, okay, this is how.
But guess what they are talking about? They're talking about the satanic temple.
Yes.
With the Pastafarians. Let me just jump in here real quick. The idea, one of the things that this topic came to me out of a desire to be circumspect, right? Because the genesis of you're floating the flying spaghetti monster, and that's clearly a fake religion, and it's a mockery of my true faith and what have you. But for a long time, as of earlier this year, I don't live in Columbia, Tennessee. I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. But it's not that different, really. When I lived in Columbia, there was this, and they were trying to institute this, again, talking about like nativity scenes and public spaces and things like that, government property, saying, well, we want to represent Christianity, we want to creche, what have you. And I said, well, not everyone, and I approached, the county level legislators. I approached the commission saying, well, really not everyone here is a Christian. That's not really representative. It's not really fair. In my mind, is establishing me as a second-class citizen here. I don't like that. I don't think that's appropriate. And again, this is not some tradition that's been going on for decades. Like, they were just trying to start it in like 2013, 2014, whatever. And I was told flatly by several members of the community and by people on the commission that if I am not a Christian, my opinion didn't matter. That I didn't.
Well, boy, aren't you down in Tennessee?
I seriously am. So, at my point, let's pull the fucking daggers. Let's have a fucking street fight right now.
Oh, boy. Well,
I will go to the wires. I built a 6-foot tall flying spaghetti monster statue and said, if you're going to put a creche on public property, you're gonna put my motherfucking flying spaghetti monster, or I will sue the goddamn county for all it's worth. And
real quick, I would like to say I like the flying spaghetti monster as an avatar of freedom of religion a lot more than Baphomet. Baphomet's just shitty, in my opinion. But I like the flying spaghetti monster.
I don't think Baphomet's that bad, but yeah, personally for me, like if there's a deity of beer and pasta, like that's the god I'm gonna worship. Personally, that's just my personality. But like
I don't know,
it just felt like a better fit for me.
Beer and pasta, you say? Oh no, like if that's the Pastafarian guy, yeah, he's great.
Yeah, that's the flying spaghetti monster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially,
but yeah, it's
god or whatever. But so the point is like, so I go out and do that, and I'm immediately, and I write letters to the editor in the local paper, and I got this thing, and I've quasi threatened, the sheriff and the county and what have you.
You threaten them with what?
I'm strong with a lawsuit.
That's not threatening anybody. That's just saying that you'll exercise.
Well,
okay. We all know what threaten means outside of legal parlance.
Right. So
lawsuits are threats.
I've come in and I'm.
But let's wrap this up, guys.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
but it's just getting late.
I'm guys. I'm gonna say this is such a huge topic. I have dedicated basically a huge swath of an entire blog to this for 4 years. So I'm really sorry that I don't feel like I talked about it like I wanted to tonight. And I'm sorry to you guys. I would love to come on for other topics.
Actually, I was going to say, Art, I understand where you're coming from. If in the future you wanted to do like a singular podcast where maybe we interviewed you about the specific topic and let you expound on it instead of
I would love to do that with a few other panelists and just this is in person. That's it's easier to talk about. I'm this digital organization. I love it, the utility of it, but it's making it difficult on this very contentious topic. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
When we have these conversations, like some of us will all invariably say something that someone wants to react to, and then there's jumping in, there's talking over. Like I try to be polite about it enough, and I get talked over a lot as a result. Like we never really kind of fully got through the topic. But essentially, all I was trying to say is like I'm not trying to make myself the bad guy here, but it's really easy to understand why I come across as the bad guy or representing the bad guy to people who are just sincere about the faith.
It's often contextual. Obviously, evangelical Christianity is a little bit different where you are versus where I am versus everywhere else in the country. That's one huge problem that America has today is trying to make rules for 300 million people that don't want anything to do with each other. Haley, I very much appreciate. I mean, you see it in memes, and you were kind enough to not put it in these blunt terms, and I appreciate it. But losing privilege feels like oppression. It is true, and these people are losing a lot of privilege. But it's just that feet really do get stepped on, and we talked about that with the gay cake thing. And I had a few other examples. Maybe we didn't get to, but I really enjoyed this talk with you guys tonight.
Just for reference, where are you located out of?
Thank you. I'm new at being a guest. I'm more often a host. I am in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Oh, cool. We Casey, we appreciate you being here with us.
Man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you all for your patience and for listening. I feel like I was really given center stage on my first visit, which I cannot express enough gratitude for that. Mm-hmm. Everyone was very patient and considerate. RJ, boy, did I kind of went up against you earlier in this talk, and you haven't come back since. I really respect the hell out of your posts and what you have to say. I'm sorry that maybe we can have a better conversation next time. Thank you all.
Where do you live?
Casey, don't encourage him.
Seriously.
He encourages himself enough.
I'm in Indy.
His head is almost as big as James's.
Boy.
Almost.
Indy.
But he's got the FO cup.
But yeah, I think it's time we wrap this stuff up. And Drew, Haley, do you guys have any parting thoughts real quick?
None that are worth mentioning. No.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, cool. Well,
yeah, I think that's probably a good spot to end it on. Thank you all for participating. It's been interesting. It's been thought-provoking. I've enjoyed it.
Yes,
but it is
sir.
time to say goodnight and maybe not finish that bottle of Jefferson's. But
Yeah.
I'm played out. I'm David Papiden.
I'm James McVeigh.
We are Fermenting Opinions. Thank y'all for being here, and we'll see you next time.